In a bold move that underscores the intersection of politics and national identity, President Donald Trump has embarked on a controversial branding campaign that aims to redefine America's geographical and historical landmarks. On his first day back in office, Trump signed an executive order that renames the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America and reverts Denali back to Mount McKinley, a name honoring the 25th President of the United States who played a significant role in America's territorial expansion. The most contentious of these name changes is the decision to restore Fort Bragg, previously renamed Fort Liberty, during a national discourse on race and Confederate symbolism, back to its original name. However, Trump's new designation attributes the name to Private First Class Roland Bragg, a World War II hero, rather than the Confederate general for whom it was originally named. This latest development has reignited discussions about the legacy of the Confederacy in America and the narrative surrounding the military's historical figures. Trump's approach to renaming these landmarks is not unprecedented. Previous presidents have also engaged in such actions. Barack Obama, for instance, restored the indigenous name Denali after years of advocacy from Alaskan natives, while George W. Bush changed the name of the Caribbean National Forest to reflect Puerto Rico's heritage. However, Trump's choices seem to represent a more nationalistic and imperialistic vision, as articulated by political rhetoric scholar Allison Prash from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The act of naming is a way that presidents can reshape their vision of the nation, she explained, suggesting that Trump's decisions reflect a desire to impose a particular narrative on American history. The renaming of Fort Bragg has been contentious since the Pentagon's decision to remove Confederate names from military installations in 2023. At that time, many lawmakers and community members expressed mixed feelings about the change, recognizing the historical significance of the base while also acknowledging the need to address its Confederate roots. Cumberland County Commissioner Jimmy Keefe articulated this sentiment, acknowledging the rationale behind the change while lamenting the loss of a name tied to many positive local experiences. Despite the administration's attempts to frame these changes as a return to honor and respect, public opinion appears divided. A Marquette University poll indicated that 71% of U.S. adults opposed renaming the Gulf of Mexico, while a 2-to-1 margin of Alaskans rejected the restoration of the name Mount McKinley, underscoring a broader disconnect between Trump's vision and the sentiments of many Americans. The implications of these name changes extend beyond mere semantics. They reflect a deeper ideological struggle regarding how history is remembered and honored in America. Trump's administration has faced criticism for its apparent disregard for historical context, leading to fears that such decisions could embolden extreme nationalist sentiments. Connor Williams, a historian involved in the renaming committee, noted the troubling nature of commemorating figures associated with treason against the United States, emphasizing the importance of critical engagement with history. Moreover, the controversy surrounding these renaming initiatives has sparked a wider debate about the role of the U.S. in global geopolitics, particularly in the context of Trump's recent overtures to Russia. As he initiates peace negotiations with President Vladimir Putin, the implications for international alliances are significant, raising concerns about the future of NATO and the security of Eastern Europe. This perceived betrayal of Ukraine's sovereignty has drawn ire from European leaders who fear that Trump's actions could embolden Russian aggression. As the nation grapples with these symbolic changes, the question remains whether they will have lasting significance or merely serve as a footnote in a tumultuous political landscape. The White House's recent actions, such as blocking media outlets that resist the new nomenclature, suggest a willingness to enforce a particular narrative, but public resistance indicates that dissent remains strong. Looking ahead, the discourse surrounding these name changes and broader geopolitical maneuvers is likely to intensify. As Trump continues to assert his vision for America, the implications for national identity, historical memory, and international relations will be closely scrutinized. the unfolding narrative will not only shape how Americans view their history but will also determine the future of their engagement on the global stage. In a political landscape increasingly marked by bold declarations and controversial policies, Donald Trump continues to stir debate with his recent assertions about legality in trade practices. In the span of just a few days, the former president has made headlines not only for his ambitious tariff proposals but also for a striking statement suggesting that actions taken to save the country might transcend legal boundaries. Such rhetoric raises significant questions about the intersection of governance and legality in his administration. In a post on his social media platform Truth Social, Trump stated, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." This declaration, which he later shared on other platforms, encapsulates a mindset that blurs the lines between lawful governance and unilateral executive action. The sentiment, reminiscent of historical figures like Napoleon Bonaparte, reflects Trump's view that his motives justify his actions even if they might contravene established laws. Analysts have noted that such assertions could embolden a more aggressive use of presidential power, particularly in light of a recent Supreme Court ruling suggesting Trump may have immunity from prosecution for actions taken in his official capacity. Simultaneously, Trump has unveiled an ambitious plan to implement reciprocal tariffs on foreign imports, which he argues are necessary to level the playing field for American workers. In his lengthy explanation posted on Truth Social, he outlined a strategy to impose a 25% tariff on aluminum and steel imports, along with similar tariffs on goods from Canada, Mexico, and China. This system will immediately bring fairness and prosperity back into the previously complex and unfair system of trade, Trump asserted, emphasizing that foreign nations must treat the U.S. fairly to avoid tariffs. He believes that these measures will not only protect domestic industries but also stimulate job growth by incentivizing foreign companies to relocate their operations to the U.S. However, these tariff plans have faced criticism from various quarters, including foreign leaders who argue that such measures could lead to economic retaliation and exacerbate global trade tensions. Despite these concerns, Trump remains steadfast, claiming that the U.S. has been treated unfairly in international trade and that his policies will rectify this imbalance. The implications of Trump's declarations and actions are profound. By suggesting that the ends justify the means, he raises ethical and constitutional dilemmas about executive power and accountability. Historical precedents exist, such as Abraham Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus during the Civil War and Richard Nixon's controversial justifications for illegal actions under the guise of national security. However, Trump's current approach appears less about national security and more focused on reshaping domestic policy and trade relations. As Congress and the judiciary grapple with the ramifications of Trump's declarations and tariff policies, the potential for increased polarization looms large. Trump's approach to governance, characterized by his insistence on a level playing field for American businesses, might resonate with a significant portion of the electorate, but it also risks alienating international partners and igniting further divisions at home. Looking ahead, the unfolding political landscape will likely be shaped by Trump's ability to implement his agenda amid legal and political challenges. As debates over the legality of his actions intensify, the question remains, will Trump's vision of governance, one that prioritizes perceived national interests over established legal frameworks, prevail in the face of institutional checks and balances? The coming months promise to be a critical period for understanding the impact of these policies on both domestic and international fronts. In the current political landscape, the actions and policies of President Donald Trump have sparked significant reactions across the United States, culminating in widespread protests and controversial executive orders. As Trump flexes his authority, particularly in areas concerning civil rights, education, and foreign policy, the implications are being keenly felt both domestically and internationally. On President's Day, February 19, activists under the banner of the 50501 movement are set to protest in numerous cities nationwide. This initiative, which promotes 50 protests, 50 states, one movement, was conceived as a direct response to what organizers deemed the anti-democratic actions of the Trump administration. The protests are positioned as a continuation of earlier demonstrations such as the one on February 5, which drew hundreds of participants across various states. Sidney Wilson, a local organizer from Pittsburgh, emphasized the significance of the timing, stating, "We are going out and protesting because we are concerned by our current president's actions. We figured it was a nice little punch." These protests arise in the wake of a series of executive orders signed by Trump, particularly those impacting federal workforce cuts and the controversial involvement of billionaire Elon Musk in government operations. The 50501 movement is calling for the impeachment of Trump, an investigation into Musk's role, and the reinstatement of diversity initiatives that have been rolled back. The movement has gained traction on social media with over 102,000 members on Reddit and more than 600,000 on Discord, reflecting a growing discontent among segments of the population. In a parallel development, Trump has made headlines with an executive order that seeks to ban transgender women and girls from competing in female sports. This order reinterprets Title IX, which traditionally protected against discrimination on the basis of sex, and has already prompted legal challenges. The Education Department is investigating federally funded schools and athletics organizations that continue to allow transgender athletes to compete aligned with their gender identity. Linda McMahon, the newly appointed head of the Education Department, has publicly supported this shift, asserting, "I do not believe biological boys should be allowed to compete with girls in sports." Critics argue that this move signals a significant rollback of rights for transgender athletes and has the potential to ignite a series of legal confrontations. The ramifications of these policies stretch beyond the U.S. borders. Trump's administration's mixed messaging on foreign policy has left allies confused and concerned. Recently, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth suggested that Ukraine may need to make concessions to Russia, raising eyebrows among both supporters and opponents of the administration. Hegseth's comments, which some interpreted as capitulation to Russian President Vladimir Putin, were later softened by clarifications that aimed to reassure allies of the U.S. commitment to supporting Ukraine. These developments illustrate a broader narrative of tension and uncertainty surrounding the Trump administration's approach to governance. As protests gear up and executive orders reshape critical areas of society, the intersection of domestic policy, civil rights, and international relations remains fraught with challenges. Looking ahead, the unfolding situation may continue to galvanize public opinion and activism as citizens grapple with the implications of Trump's policies. The protests scheduled for President's Day are only a precursor to what may become an ongoing series of demonstrations as the 50501 movement and other groups mobilize against the administration's agenda. Additionally, as legal challenges to new policies gain momentum, the potential for significant courtroom battles looms, particularly in areas concerning civil rights and education. The coming months promise to be pivotal, not only for the Trump administration but also for the broader fabric of American democracy. In a bold move that has sent ripples through the global economy, President Donald Trump has initiated a plan to implement reciprocal tariffs on imports from various trading partners. This strategy, announced on February 16, 2025, represents a significant shift from decades of trade policy aiming to recalibrate what Trump describes as an uneven playing field in international trade. The implications of this policy extend far beyond the borders of the United States, potentially reshaping the economic landscape for countries around the world. As the global economy grapples with a myriad of challenges, including geopolitical tensions and economic slowdowns, Trump's tariff plan introduces a new layer of complexity. The principle behind reciprocal tariffs is straightforward: any tariffs faced by American exports should be mirrored on imports from those countries. While this may seem like a fair approach, the practical execution is fraught with complications. Ted Murphy, an international trade expert at Sidley Austin, highlighted the monumental task ahead, stating, "For every widget, every tariff classification, you can have 150 different duty rates. You've got Albania to Zimbabwe." The ramifications of Trump's directive are already becoming evident. By signaling a push for reciprocal tariffs, the administration has created an atmosphere of uncertainty for international businesses that rely on stable trading conditions. This uncertainty comes at a time when inflation concerns are mounting as rising costs for imported goods could further strain American consumers. The president's own commitment to lowering prices on everyday items is now in jeopardy, as increased tariffs could lead to higher consumer prices and potentially delay the Federal Reserve's plans to lower interest rates. The shift towards a more nationalist approach to trade threatens to dismantle the multilateral framework that has governed international trade for decades. Historically, the World Trade Organization WTO has facilitated agreements that promote fair trade practices among member countries. Trump's approach, however, seeks to sideline these established treaties in favor of direct negotiations with individual countries, a move that could exacerbate tensions and lead to further disruptions in global supply chains. Countries like India, which currently imposes considerable tariffs on U.S. goods, may find themselves at the center of this newly crafted trade landscape. The U.S. has a significant trade deficit with India amounting to $45 billion last year, largely due to the disparity in tariff rates on similar goods. If the Trump administration proceeds with reciprocal tariffs, American manufacturers could face increased costs for essential materials, hindering their competitive edge. Industry experts are voicing concerns about the potential fallout from these policies. John W. Mitchell, president of the IPC, an electronics industry trade association, warned that increased protectionism could weaken the very foundation of American manufacturing. New tariffs will raise manufacturing costs, disrupt supply chains, and drive production offshore, he stated. Some analysts suggest that Trump's strategy may serve as a negotiating tactic rather than a definitive shift in policy. Christine McDaniel, a former Treasury official, noted that there exists a narrow path where this could ultimately promote trade if it compels other countries to lower their tariffs. However, skepticism remains about whether such negotiations will genuinely benefit American interests or merely cater to the political allies of the administration. As the business community navigates this turbulent landscape, companies are left to speculate about the future of their supply chains and the costs of doing business. The uncertainty surrounding tariff rates on thousands of products creates a precarious environment for businesses that depend on international trade. For many, the stakes are high, as increased import costs could lead to job losses and diminished competitiveness in the market. The implications of Trump's tariff plan are not confined to large corporations. Small businesses are also feeling the pressure of this shifting economic policy. Reports indicate that many entrepreneurs are grappling with unpaid invoices and funding uncertainties as federal policies rapidly evolve. David Funk, founder of Zero Emissions Northwest, shared his frustrations over a rejected invoice due to halted projects, illustrating how the administration's decisions can have immediate and devastating impacts on small businesses. In the face of these challenges, small business owners are taking proactive measures to safeguard their operations, including scaling back inventory purchases and re-evaluating hiring plans. The National Federation of Independent Business has reported that uncertainty among its members has reached alarming levels, prompting many to reconsider their growth strategies. As the U.S. economy braces for the potential impact of these sweeping changes, the question remains: will Trump's approach ultimately foster a more equitable global trading environment, or will it lead to further isolation and economic disarray? The coming months will be critical in determining the trajectory of American trade policy and its effects on the global economy. With the stakes higher than ever, businesses and consumers alike will be watching closely as this unfolding drama continues to play out on the world stage. In a world increasingly shaped by geopolitical tensions and shifting alliances, the recent activities of the Trump administration have sent shockwaves through Europe, raising questions about the future of U.S. foreign policy. As the Munich Security Conference unfolded, it became evident that Trump's approach under new leadership is not only reimagining America's role on the global stage but also reshaping relationships with traditional allies. The administration's mixed messaging on critical issues, notably concerning Ukraine and NATO, has left European leaders grappling with uncertainty at a time when clarity is paramount. The Munich Security Conference, a key gathering for global leaders to discuss pressing security issues, highlighted this confusion. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's remarks, which suggested substantial concessions that Ukraine might need to make in any potential peace negotiations with Russia, drew sharp criticism. Hegseth labeled Ukraine's hopes of reclaiming all occupied territories as unrealistic, a statement that many interpreted as undermining Ukraine's negotiating position. Former Swedish Prime Minister Carl Bildt characterized the speech as an innovative approach to negotiation that risked preemptively conceding leverage to Russia. Amidst these developments, Secretary of State Marco Rubio's delayed arrival in Munich, due to mechanical issues with his aircraft, served as a metaphor for the broader disarray within the U.S. administration. While Rubio's team emphasized a commitment to a just and lasting peace, the discordant messages from Hegseth and other officials created a backdrop of uncertainty about American intentions. The administration's strategy appears to be pivoting towards a more isolationist stance with a focus on regions like Asia and Latin America. While European leaders fear a substantial reduction in U.S. military presence on the continent. This shift could embolden adversaries like Russia, whose President Vladimir Putin may see new opportunities to expand influence in Eastern Europe. As the possibility of U.S. troop withdrawals looms, the specter of a weakened NATO alliance raises alarms among European officials who have rallied around Ukraine since the onset of the conflict. At the conference, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a passionate case against any agreements reached without Ukraine's involvement, urging for the formation of a European army that could operate independently of U.S. influence. Zelensky's insistence on not accepting deals made behind our backs reflects a growing sentiment among European leaders that they must prepare for a future where U.S. commitments are less reliable. The divergent views within the Trump administration were evident in the contrasting statements of Vice President J.D. Vance, who suggested the use of military tools of leverage against Russia, and Hegseth's earlier assertion that U.S. troops would not be deployed to Ukraine. Such contradictions have led to a perception of an administration in flux, where officials seem to be interpreting and relaying the president's positions without a coherent strategy. This lack of clarity is not only troubling for European allies but also echoes a broader pattern seen during Trump's first term, where loyalists were often prioritized over experienced diplomats, leading to high turnover and inconsistent messaging. Critics within the Republican Party have expressed concern that the administration's approach may ultimately serve to embolden hostile regimes, including Russia, at the expense of U.S. interests and alliances. As the world watches these developments unfold, the implications of Trump's foreign policy decisions are becoming increasingly apparent. European leaders are preparing for a future that may require them to assume greater responsibility for their own defense, a significant shift from the post-World War II consensus that placed American leadership at the forefront of European security. Looking ahead, the Munich Security Conference was more than just an event, it was a reflection of a changing geopolitical landscape, with Trump signaling a realignment of U.S. priorities. European nations must now navigate a complex web of diplomacy and security without the steadfastness of American support they have come to rely on. The coming weeks will likely reveal whether this new approach will lead to a collaborative reimagining of transatlantic relations or exacerbate divisions that could reshape the international order for years to come. In a series of dramatic political maneuvers, the Trump administration is redefining U.S. foreign policy with deep implications for international relations, particularly in the realm of foreign aid and diplomatic engagement. Central to this reshaping is Peter Marocco, who has emerged as a key figure in the administration's efforts to dismantle the traditional structures of American foreign assistance. His controversial history, marked by clandestine meetings with radical elements abroad, raises concerns about the future of U.S. diplomacy and its impact on global stability. Marocco's ascent began during Trump's first term, when he served as a senior political appointee at the State Department, where he was charged with promoting stability in conflict-ridden regions such as the Balkans. However, his tenure was marred by a significant diplomatic misstep during a 2018 trip to the region. While the visit was officially framed as an initiative to counter violent extremism, Morocco secretly met with ethno-nationalist Bosnian Serb leaders, including Milorad Dodik, a figure under U.S. sanctions for obstructing peace efforts. This meeting not only contravened established U.S. policy but also lent legitimacy to extremists who opposed the American-backed peace agreement in Bosnia, a move described by a U.S. official as fundamentally undermining American interests. Following his departure from the State Department, Morocco was appointed to a senior position at the U.S. Agency for International Development (USAID), where he attempted to reorient the agency's mission to align with a more militaristic and Christian nationalist agenda. His tenure was characterized by attempts to halt numerous programs that supported Bosnia and Herzegovina's unified government, indicating a strategic pivot away from the traditional U.S. focus on humanitarian aid. Former colleagues reported that Morocco sought to impose stringent oversight on spending and favored initiatives that benefited Christian minorities abroad, raising alarms about a potential erosion of the agency's foundational principles. Now, as the Director for Foreign Assistance at the State Department and Deputy Administrator of USAID, Morocco is executing a broad overhaul of U.S. foreign aid policy. Upon his recent inauguration, he swiftly initiated an order to freeze foreign aid and place agency staff on administrative leave, echoing the tactics he employed previously but on a larger scale. Critics within the agency fear this could lead to a significant degradation of operational capacity and strategic efficacy, especially in regions like the Balkans, where U.S. interests are intricately tied to stability and peace. Morocco's actions have drawn legal scrutiny as lawsuits from employees and organizations challenge his sweeping changes. Observers note that his approach appears to be rooted in a vendetta against colleagues who opposed his earlier policies, suggesting a campaign of retribution rather than a coherent foreign policy strategy. In a political climate marked by deepening divisions and contentious debates over U.S. foreign engagement, Morocco's tenure may well define a new controversial chapter in American diplomacy. As the Trump administration embarks on this ambitious overhaul, it also faces broader geopolitical challenges, including the ongoing war in Ukraine and the shifting dynamics in the Middle East. Trump's recent engagement with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signals his intent to directly influence the conflict there, but it remains to be seen how his administration's foreign policy will navigate the complexities of these global issues. Meanwhile, Trump's efforts to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia through the Abraham Accords continue to unfold. Despite a turbulent regional backdrop marked by conflict, the administration appears committed to leveraging any diplomatic openings to solidify its legacy in the Middle East. However, the delicate balance of interests, particularly regarding the Palestinian question, complicates these endeavors. In conclusion, the Trump administration's aggressive recalibration of foreign aid and diplomatic engagement under Morocco's stewardship reflects a broader ideological shift that prioritizes national interests over traditional humanitarian values. As these policies take shape, the implications for U.S. foreign relations and global stability remain profound, setting the stage for a contentious political landscape both domestically and internationally. Observers will be closely monitoring developments as the administration seeks to implement its vision for America's role on the world stage.